thinking about my own personal history, and I've always been making photographs since I was in early high school, things like that. And I was starting to rummage through my archive, and I came across some old slides, and I was finishing my graduate studies and kind of tweaking out about that, and was trying to make some easy work that I could understand pretty quickly. And so I started laying these slides on the light table. And there's something about a light table that's kind of democratic. You can really immediately move something from 10 years ago right next to something that's 2 years ago. And I was kind of fascinated with that, how I could create new relationships between my past, things like that. And then, just intuitively, there's like a weird mysticism to artists that maybe people who aren't artists want to be fascinated with. But there's nothing really magical about it, just intuitively started stacking them and making new images. So that's kind of where everything began. But yeah, so I was thinking about Roland Barthes. If we want to throw some theory into this artist talk, he was talking about the photograph as a memory, and obviously as an exact moment of time and space. So I was kind of enjoying that idea of stacking one image with another and being able to create new moments of time and space and new realities. But what I was finding was they're basically just double exposures, and so they were a lot more successful when the spaces that I was creating were conceivable or believable, rather than just bam bam, image, and everyone's like, okay. So yeah, so that's basically what I've been thinking about with my work.
Could you maybe talk about specific pieces and how you chose to layer certain images?
Yeah. Well, the challenge with the work is that a lot of it is light-based, and so it's kind of hard to recreate what your eye does naturally with light. Your eye is a lot smarter than a camera lens. We can account for different exposures simultaneously, which is really prevalent in night photography. It's really hard to recreate what our eye gets used to with the light with a photograph. So when you look at the two slides, your eye actually can recreate depth, and so that little millimeter space between each slide, your eye can phase in between each one, and again, you get tricked and you believe that what you're looking at is real. So the challenge was trying to create a housing or a vehicle, to recreate that experience, and that's where these light cubes came in. And so when you look through, in theory, you should be able to have that experience. So I don't know. That's part of what's funny about the work, is I could talk about this one and no one would really know what I was talking about unless they remembered. So there's like a private part of the experience that's fascinating. I was talking with John and last night about it a little bit, and he points out a good point that I could have easily gone down like a trail of like weirdness when you walk up to the boxes. I could have been like shocking somehow, but there's like a wonderful amount of restraint, I think was the word he used last night, that I like to walk the line with. I think it'd be like a really easy read if you're looking through it and it just kind of grosses you out or something. It becomes like a house of horrors or something like that. But so yeah, I wanted the images to be just normal images that I'm interested in. So maybe one of the common themes pictorially, like kind of asking about certain images, is just the suburbs. I'm a white guy from the suburbs. It's my identity. I can't shake it. It helps with some things, and I could be just terribly bland and vanilla in other aspects. So I kind of embraced that part of my own personal history, my own identity. And I think that shows up a lot in the images, is suburban scenes mixed with some sort of majestic scene, and they both kind of cancel each other out and also elevate each other. And so there's a weird interplay between the identities of the spaces that I'm documenting and combining. So yeah, I mean, I could just pick apart one image like that one there, and it's Niagara Falls, it's the Maid of the Mist, it's a bit of Americana, it's a bit of the sublime, things like that, mixed with something that's just so commonplace in America, like the ready-made apartment complex, an architect's dream, just to see the buildings along the rolling hillside, and it's an empty tennis court. The tennis court doesn't have any utility anymore. You could play tennis, but it would be really hard to keep score, so there's no nets. And so the interplay between those, I find to be pretty interesting and synergistic. But
are there any questions for Mark?
Where are you going to go next?
I'm sorry?
What are you going to do next?
Well, I'm going to put myself out and try to get some more shows. I'm kind of, I made like 80, I made hundreds of images, but then like there's what, like 86 images in this room. Like I've kind of made plenty of work, I feel like, and I just need to start showing it more. And I'm experimenting with some different ideas with the light boxes. There's different size magnifying glasses obviously that you can get, and so maybe it makes these boxes more communal if the opening is bigger. So I'm thinking about that for next steps. But yeah, I think I've got a lot to chew on, I feel like, right now, but I'm working towards. So it's a good question, though.
Right.
I always think about what's next, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Are these all old slides, or do you ever take new pictures and kind of anticipate layering them when you're taking them?
That's a great question. I learned a lot about the process as to what works and what doesn't work. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the idea of density with the photograph, but it's a concept of exposure. So the more dense something is, the more it's been exposed, the less dense. So what I was figuring out is I needed to find parts of the pictorial space that were either really overexposed or really underexposed. So the underexposed things became black and were kind of masking agents for what was underneath it or on top of it. And what was really overexposed became blank and could be filled in with another thing. So for that image, for example, snow is sort of the operative way that I create the effect. So the only thing that is left over are the dark parts of that snow scene. So there's the fence and the wiring and the little sled and the branches and things like that. So it allowed for the interior scene to sort of seamlessly come into play. So to answer your question, yeah, I am combining things that I've already created, and then probably in the last year alone I've made like 500, 700 images and started recombining them.
So are these composites we're looking at here, or is this layered? Is that like a photo of the two together?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, the macro lens. The macro lens's depth kind of allows for that interplay that I was talking about between each 35mm slide.
Okay.
So I put the 35mm slide onto a light table and rephotographed it.
Okay. And these here are just like actual set up against each other, or are they slightly skew, or how?
They're the actual slides taped together.
Okay.
And there's a 3D printed component inside that holds really seamlessly and really tight a light, the slides, and the magnifying glass.
Okay, so the magnifying glass is right up in front.
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly.
How close are the slides together? Because you can see the sense of depth
That's what's
between them.
That was the original sort of fascination that I have with the process, is that they're just butted right next to each other. It's literally just a millimeter that your eye gets tricked with.
Okay.
And that's just wild to me. I think that's cool.
Yeah.
So you talked a little bit about history and the history of photo, and it's just like that one instant moment in time. And you're kind of creating like an instance where two moments of time are coming together, and they do have a very nostalgic feel to them. And so I was wondering on like, how does that nostalgia comes together between two different like moments of time? Like, is that something that you think about when you're making the images, or is that something that comes afterward and you like reflect and say these two moments make together aesthetically or conceptually?
It's an excellent question. What I've been thinking about is, again, like how we order our memories. Like, memory is not static. Memory changes as we go forward in life. We are always relating our memories, our past, to our present and our future, our dreams and things like that. So in light of that idea or thought, I don't really preconceive. Like, I'm not like, man, I'm gonna go to the Niagara Falls, I'm gonna take that mist picture, and then I'm gonna go to the suburbs. And it's not as thought out like that, as specifically. It's a little bit looser. So what I'll do is I'm just making photographs that I find interesting, and then sort of reassembling them, similar to how we do our memory. Like I'm chatting with old friends and things like that, and like they'll tell me a story about a night. I'm just like, I didn't even know that person was there, or did I really do that? Usually because I was drunk or something. But so there's a weird memory is really strange like that. Probably to our benefit, we don't remember things exactly the way they were. I think it would be really hard to go through life remembering everything, every dumb thing you said, or every mean thing you said, or every mean thing that was said to you, or we'd be like bowled over with the ecstasy of another memory or something like that. It would be really hard to manage our lives if we had like a clear vision of the past. So that's the process. It's not as maybe thought out before the process as maybe some other artists do, like Jeff Wall or something like that.
Do you think that you're desensitized because you're shooting so many photos, and so like each moment is not as important as it would be if you were like not shooting with like digital technological advancements?
Yeah, I think I wouldn't say I'm desensitized. I would say that I am, or any more than anyone is, I guess, just because of what you're talking about, like the prevalence of images in our culture and the access that everybody has to being able to make images. But I think there's a specificity to the subjects that I choose to photograph. Like, I don't think it's arbitrary or random. I think there's intentionality to the things that I choose to photograph. Even if the categories, if you could call them that, are sort of wide and various. It's not like I'm like just taking pictures of lakes, or this year I'm just going to take pictures of parrots. So I'm like, no. I mean, we all have like a wide range of interests. We're all sort of specific individuals. I don't know. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
I was kind of confused by your question, to be honest.
It was imagery. It's good.
Okay. Cool. Yes.
I had one. Can you give personal, like, insider meaning into what that photograph, like the nostalgia in that, the layering of those two images? And is that you? And is that your
Yes.
you in it?
That is
okay.
me.
And was that you in your house or something? Like the overlay between the two windows?
It's kind of weird because, like, when I look out of that wall, like, that's the scene. So, like, that's pretty much was my backyard at that house. But that part isn't really important. Again, the process is really just about seeing what I've made and rearranging and making new things. So it becomes more like strategizing the pictorial space. So being able to find, a figure that's in this third to be able to allow this to not like have like skin in this. Like, it becomes more like a game of the way the space is filled and then not filled. Kind of going back to what I was talking about, where like snow allows another layer to come through because it becomes like a blank spot in the exposure. I don't know if I'm explaining it well, but
Yeah.
it's not, I'm not really primarily concerned with the end image as I am creating a seamless image out of two.
Two goals there. The one is the nostalgia aspect of the combination, and the other is the architectural thing of putting the two images and fitting them in one.
I love that you use the word architectural. It's
Yeah.
extremely about that. And I think the nostalgia just happens on its own. But
That has a lot of storytelling content to me. When I look at that, I'm seeing like somebody thinking back on their childhood, looking in a playhouse, like in their youth, and I see that right away. Like, that's what I see when I look at it.
Yeah, I think that's the benefit of making hundreds of these, is that some work better than others. Like, I edited out so many, even though I have 86 images in here, like, I edited out a lot, and then chose to highlight the ones that I agree with you. Like, you can totally transport yourself to that meaning if you direct. I understand that completely. Yes, ma'am.
Do you remember nostalgia?
Do I remember it?
So I have two questions. That's my first one. So I'm interested in how you still the work. What makes those slides and those boxes particularly different than this slide? Like, what makes that slide exist in that box what makes that slide exist on that wall?
Yeah.
What makes this slide exist? Like, how do you decide that? What is that?
You know, it's just going to be total cop-out land right now, but like, it was really just the practicalities of the project. Like, Ken contacted me about 4 months ago and said, hey, you're going to have this show. I'm like, rocking. And these were the best images at the time for the timeline that it would take to make them. There's not like a hierarchy of images. It's not like these are like the most important to me images or like the most meaningful images. It's purely just, again, like being strategic and trying to finish a project on time. So for future exhibitions, I'm glad to bring that up because part of my interest in the suburbs is an interest in modularity. So the slide projector and these boxes can all be rearranged with new images. So I specifically designed it so I can slide the glass up from this light box, put a new transparency on, slide it back in. You know, I had asked you to design the 3D printing inside of here so I can easily take a new slide combination and basically reuse these boxes over and over and over. And obviously the slide projector, you know, it's a beautiful suburban object. It's, you know, it holds 80. It could hold less than 80, it could never hold more than 80, and so they become placeholders, and I'm able to just plug in new content. So I think that type of housing and those types of concerns really mimic, you know, some of the suburban scenes like the ready-made apartment complex I was talking about. You know, just throw a new human in there, lease ends, take them out. Throw a new human in there, lease ends, take them out. Things like that. Public parks, like, oh, we're going to be leisure today. It's a really nice day out. Let's go to Goodale Park. Like, let's walk. People can walk around. Like, things like that.
I just wonder if it was all the same image. Like if there was this image was in that box and on the wall, like how the conversation would change. Like, would it change? Would I interpret things differently? You know, how would that?
I don't know. I wonder if it would become redundant.
Yeah.
Just because of the image is the same. But I think if I were to do that strategy, it would be like, it would just be one image, and then it would be more about like our human experience and like the way we can process the same image differently. So I wouldn't have 86 images, I'd have just the one, because that would be what it was about. I'm not as interested in that probably. I think that content still comes through without limiting myself to the one image, or that kind of like becomes like a narrow, it becomes narrow to me, but someone else might be interested in that.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for the question.
Yeah, your concept is kind of the free, I like the freedom in the way you can, you know, like you said, reinvent and putting different images together, whereas most forms of art you can't do that with. I mean, with this, it's always, there's this freedom of free flow of ideas and things that are ongoing. And I think that's a rare kind of unique thing to your concept.
Yeah, thank you. And I think it's interesting too, like, eventually maybe I get tired of one of these images and I take them apart and I reassemble them. Like, you know, maybe I want to Maid of the Mist with a dinosaur, I don't know. Like, the possibilities are limitless.
You're not locked in.
I'm not locked in.
Yeah.
But now I feel like you guys are like my investors or something, like I'm selling you guys, like, you guys, the sky's the limit. If you guys want to get in, let's get in. On the floor, like, we're going places. But it is true. I mean, there's again that idea of modularity. Like they become placeholders and you can plug and play basically.
So are you using the slide size basically as a restraint in these? I mean, you're not going and saying, I like this. If this was just a little bit wider, I'll go reshoot that a little bit bigger. Or you use the word ready-made. So I'm wondering how much do you manipulate the slides at all as far as the scale or cropping? Or are you just allowing, because I mean, that would give you a lot more freedom to do your random thing if they're all kind of in a format, similar. You know?
There is consistency in the sort of framing. It's always a 2x3 aspect, just like a 35mm.
Yeah, but are you like, okay, I like this part, but I'll go in and reshoot that up closer or anything like that?
No, like.
But so you're just taking what exactly you get on the slide.
Exactly. So
okay.
the black edge is the slide. Now I do some like color correction and things like that because the camera gets confused by the different light sources. You know, if I have a scene that's shot outdoors and then a scene that's indoors, the camera can only color balance for the one or the other exposure, light balance. So I don't know, I'm talking over people's heads or what, but
So there's a little bit of manipulation.
there is.
Okay.
Like for this one, also the window in there, I don't know if you looked at it yet, but there's a window there that's a lot more overexposed than the rest of the scene. And so in that image, I took out the window and reassembled it because the camera could only account for the either bright part of that image or the dark part. So it's not like exactly one-to-one to reality. There is some modification.
So you're shooting digital?
I shoot 35mm slides and then I rephotograph them with the digital camera.
Okay.
Yeah. Good question. Anybody else? Well, thank you.